Welcome in to Outkick the Show, presented by Oddshark. Go to Oddshark for all of your gambling and informational related needs. I apologize for being late today. I have been spending all day, pretty much, since about 10:30 in the morning. So after about 7 hours of work, I've been getting my pictures taken for the morning radio show. So my hair is did up nice. And I am ready to roll with you guys about an hour late on Thursday. I hope you guys are having spectacular Thursdays. We've got three different things to talk about. Number one, we are going to talk about my top 13 coaches in college football. Number two, we're going to talk about Confederate statues. And number three, the terror attack in Spain. Lots to get to. Let's go ahead and dive in. I appreciate all of you coming in here to hang out. I want to start by giving you my top 13 college football coaches. My top 13 college football coaches in America right now as we prepare to begin the season. Early, if you haven't read it, it's up on Outkick with more details. And I talked about this on the radio show earlier this week. But I got to tell you, number one, Nick Saban. Great stat for you. Nick Saban's teams at Alabama have been ranked in the top number one slot in the years 2009, 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. It's an unprecedented streak that has never been equaled before in college football history. I haven't heard anybody else talking about this. Talk about it. Talk about how crazy it is. Was it 08 too? Were they number one in 08 too? You guys might be right. I think I wrote that in the column, right? They started number 8. Number one in 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. 10 straight years. 10 straight years that Nick Saban's team has been ranked number one overall. Bear Bryant's team never did it for more than 3. Incredible statistic there for you right now. Number 2, Urban Meyer. He's 61-6 at Ohio State. And Paul Feinbaum said yesterday, is it possible he's underrated? Unquestioned number 2. Number 3, Dabo Swinney. Number 4, Jimbo Fisher. The only 4 coaches in major college football right now to have won national championships. Number 5 on my list, Chris Peterson. Number 6, James Franklin won back-to-back 9-win seasons at Vanderbilt for the first time since women earned the right to vote, and now has won a Big Ten championship in his 3rd year at Penn State. Number 7, Bobby Petrino. Number 8, great stat for Bobby Petrino. Final 2 years of Bobby Petrino at Arkansas, he went 12-4 in the SEC. So far in 4 seasons at Arkansas, Brett Bielema has won 10 games in the SEC. So Bobby Petrino in his final 2 years won more than anybody else. Pretty incredible than Brett Bielema has done so far in 4 years. Number 8, Jim Harbaugh. Number 9, great stat on Harbaugh. He hasn't finished any higher than 3rd in the Big Ten East since he got to Ann Arbor. Number 9, David Shaw. David Shaw, probably the most underrated major college football coach in America, not named Bill Snyder. Number 10, I've got Bill Snyder. Number 11, Mike Gundy. He's a man. He's 50 now. Number 12, Mark Richt. And number 13, David Cutcliffe. Those are the 13 best college football coaches in America, and I'm very confident in them. Now, Tom Herman and anybody else out there who was at a smaller school and now is at a bigger school did not count, right? Because I'm only doing at Big 5 conference schools. So there is no doubt in my mind, yes, Mark Richt is much better than Gus Malzahn. There is no doubt in my mind. And I believe, again, if Bobby Petrino had the possibility or the opportunity to actually coach at a big-time program, remember what he's done at Arkansas and at Louisville, what would he do if he ever got to coach against at a top 10 program? It would be incredible. So those are my top 13. I left Mark D'Antonio off at Michigan State because he went 3-9 last year. You can't go 1-8 in the Big Ten and consider yourself a top 13 coach, in my opinion. That is my list. The Shark Humper is not there yet. If the Shark Humper goes 10-2 and actually shows that his offense can be decent, he might be back up in the mix. You have to be a current coach. Hugh Freeze is definitely top 10 when it comes to calling escorts on an airplane. Okay, we can talk about this. We can continue to debate it. Justin Fuente hasn't been there long enough, although I love him. I think he's going to be really good at Virginia Tech. Obviously, he was very successful at Memphis. He can't lose to Indiana and be in the top list. The great question is, who would you guys say is the second best coach right now in the SEC? My top 13, I think the most fascinating fact, 5 of those guys are ACC coaches, and that's not even including Justin Fuente or Larry Fedora, who both have arguments to be top 20 caliber coaches in college football right now based on what they've done. Only 1 in the SEC, several from the Big 12. Every other conference has at least 2, and the Big 10 has 3. So there are a lot of options there. Okay, I also want to talk about this. I believe that one of the bad things about social media is that it actually gets taken seriously because the media is on there all day and it makes writing stories very easy. But this statistic that came out today I thought was fantastic. They have done a poll on whether people believe that Confederate monuments should be pulled. Okay, this is an unbelievable statistic. Should Confederate monuments be pulled? This is the latest Marist poll, okay? And everybody out there, like, I'm of the opinion that the answer is no, right? I'm one of the few people I've seen in sports media even have an opinion on this that is anything other than the Confederacy is awful. Everybody who ever fought for the South is an awful human being. For national adults, the question was, do you think statues honoring leaders of the Confederacy should be removed because they are offensive to some people or remain as a historic symbol? Those are the options according to the most recent Marist poll. For adults in this country, 62% believe that the monuments should not be moved. Only 27% of people believe that the monuments should be moved. Republicans, 86% of Republicans say that statues should not be moved. Only 6% say no. Even for Democrats, 44% of Democrats say they shouldn't be moved. 47% say they should be moved. And for independents, and this blew me away too, independents believe they should remain 61% to 27%. That is an amazing data point. Donald Trump has probably never come out in favor of anything that is more popular than his position not to pull down these monuments. Again, 62% of people on his side, only 27% on the other side. This is a Marist poll, okay? What I want to use this as an example for, I tweeted out that social media is often a funhouse mirror. That is, it distorts, just like a funhouse does, your overall body. Social media distorts overall public opinion, and it's overcovered by the media because it's an easy article to write. Oh, so-and-so said this, and they got turned into this story and that story. I want you to think about this for a minute. I've used this as an example, and I think I told this on the radio show. I use polls all the time on my social media account to see whether or not my opinion is likely to be shared by my Twitter followers. But I also don't presume that that Twitter following is an accurate reflection of the overall population, because the vast majority of people who listen to my radio show, Outkick the Coverage every day, are not on Twitter, and they're not on social media, and they certainly aren't on Periscope and Facebook, which is an even smaller segment of the population, right? So I went on there and I said something that I thought was pretty interesting. I said, what do you think about how do you consume my radio show? And I gave 4 options. I said, do you stream it? Do you podcast it? Do you satellite radio it? Or do you listen on regular terrestrial radio, AM or FM stations? I'm actually curious what the poll would be here. Again, this is my morning radio show. I'm kind of curious what the reaction is going to be in here. You can vote and let me know what your way to listen is. My bet would be that the vast majority of people who are on Periscope and who are on the Facebook show listen on podcast or stream, right? I think you guys are going to see iHeartRadio, and you're going to see podcast, and you're going to see a lot of different things associated with that, right? So that percentage is actually tiny, right? In comparison to the number of people that actually listen to it live on the radio across all 50 states from 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern on 250 a.m. and FM stations. That's pretty wild. Pretty wild, because most people, again, when I did that poll, it came down 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. Okay? So everybody was coming across at 25%. And then when you look at the actual numbers, the vast majority are listening on the 250 AM and FM stations nationwide. Like, we're going to get millions of podcast downloads this fall, but we have millions and millions of people who are listening live all over the country in all 50 states. That's because the radio penetration rate is still, which sounds like a hell of a sexual term, sounds like a really, is much more substantial. But if I had only used that poll to put up how people were consuming my content, I would have been like, oh, the same number of people are listening on podcast as listen on radio, as listen on streaming, as listen on iHeartRadio. And it's wild because you end up getting an artificial perception of where your audience is if you use social media as an arbiter. And that's why I saw that statistic come out about the people and what they thought about the Confederate statue removal. Those people aren't on Twitter. They're not sitting around on Facebook all day. They have jobs. They're out at their desk working all day. They're not sitting around advocating as social justice warriors on Twitter. And so my suggestion to everybody out there, whether you run a business, whether you are in the television industry, whether you're in media, whether you're just a person who tries to think about what others are believing, don't use social media echo chambers as your proxy for what the rest of the world is thinking. Don't do it. Because you just heard that statistic, 62% of people don't believe Confederate monuments should come down. Only 27% believe that they do. Now, I see this all the time. People who are on Twitter see like 10 people say something and they're like, oh my God, everybody believes this, because they're not used to getting deluged all the time. I'll be honest with you. Every now and then, when I would be on Twitter when I first started, if people disagreed, it would get deluged. I would get deluged with something. I'd be like, holy shit, nobody has my same opinion. And then I would get out in public and everybody comes up to me and they're like, man, I'm so glad you're saying what you say. I'm so glad that you have the position that you do. And somebody just said it. Chick-fil-A didn't bow to the mob. When they said, hey, we don't agree with gay marriage, I guarantee you their Twitter account got destroyed. And they were probably like, man, we're in trouble. We are totally in trouble. Nobody is ever going to come to Chick-fil-A again. Did you just see the numbers that came out? Chick-fil-A doubles every other fast food restaurant when it comes to revenue. The average Chick-fil-A does over $4 million in revenue, even being closed on Sunday. Every other fast food restaurant, the highest average is like 2.2 million. Okay? I want you to think about that for a second. I want you to just think about that for a second, how unbelievable that difference is. If you run a company, you can't be a bitch because people on social media are saying mean things to you, right? And yet I see companies all the time. ESPN's a great example. I've been reading about like ESPN, like we're not going to miss anything. We've got the most aggressive social media team out there, and we make sure that we're covering whatever is trending. Yesterday, I tweeted out this link. ESPN hit the lowest ratings I believe they've ever hit in their history. The most watched show on ESPN yesterday was PTI, 500,000 people. 5 years ago, over 1 million people a day were watching PTI. Where have all those viewers gone? I think those viewers have bailed on ESPN because ESPN is using social media as their gauge for what people want to hear about. And they're like, well, people on social media are talking all the time about Colin Kaepernick. And so we're going to cover Colin Kaepernick every day. But your average fan out there doesn't want to sit around and watch ESPN cover national anthem protests all day. So yesterday, and I tweeted out the link, you can go find it on my Twitter account, @ClayTravis, ESPN posted the lowest ratings in mid-August in the history of the network. All of their viewers are bailing. And they're continuing to double down on the programming that they have. ESPN, our shirts are going to go for sale next week. That's when we're going to debut Outkick VIP. They are obsessed with worrying about what people are talking about on Twitter. And the vast majority of people who watch ESPN never use Twitter. So you're getting a fundamental misapprehension of what your audience wants when you consider them on Twitter. And that doesn't even roll into the fact that ESPN has gone so far left-wing that of the tiny fraction of people that watch ESPN that are on Twitter, those people that do follow them are even more liberal than the average person who's on Twitter. So when they're sitting around saying, hey, we got to talk about Colin Kaepernick, everybody on social media is talking about Colin Kaepernick, what they're actually doing is alienating the vast majority of their audience. It reminds me of a theory I remember back in the day when it was a great theory, right? If you adjust your defense to where the guy usually gets hits, sometimes the team ends up having more success because they might only get hits in baseball 3 out of 10 times. So if you move your defense to where you think they're going to hit, theoretically you open up the 70% of the area where they may hit it more often. So think about that from this perspective. ESPN's ratings are plummeting, I believe, because they're over-relying on what social media is saying. If you go read those articles about how they're saying, like, we're going to make sure that SportsCenter is relevant, we're going to make sure that ESPN programming is relevant, they're all citing social media as their sourcing for what's relevant. The problem is it's like 15% of their audience. And it's a 15% of their audience which doesn't reflect what everybody else is doing. The audience is tanking. This is my theory. And this is a great example, too, about the Confederate monuments. All the media is covering this thing like the only people who don't want the Confederate monuments removed are racist. Half of all Democrats and 61% of all independents are opposed to Confederate monuments coming down. This is literally the best issue that Donald Trump has ever jumped on in terms of what the overall population cares about based on that Marist poll. And I'm willing to go out there and say this is an absurd, ridiculous decision that people are taking. Let's talk about the terror attack for a minute. I want you to think about this for a minute. What's the first thing? ISIS has claimed responsibility for the terror attacks that just happened in Barcelona. Obviously, I hate terrorism more than anybody. I think that every terrorist is an awful human being. I don't think they can make us joke, make us laugh. I think they should all go straight to hell, all right? Let's get that out of the way. What's the first thing that Democrats say every time there's a terror attack? What's the first thing Democrats say? You can't judge Muslims based on a small percentage of Muslims that believe that terrorism is the way to go. That's literally the first thing that every Democratic politician says, right? You cannot judge the Muslim population based on a tiny percentage of people who believe in violence and terrorism, right? First thing they say. What's the first thing they said when we had the situation in Charlottesville? Donald Trump is to blame. This is what happens with Republicans. This is something that has to be addressed by every Republican politician. There is no room whatsoever for any white person to be racist. Every white person should have to come out and condemn the fact that there are terrorists inside of the Republican Party on the right wing. Think about that for a minute. The exact opposite reaction. They're both fringe elements, right? Use your brains. Islamic terrorists who believe that the Quran tells them to kill people are a fringe element of the Muslim population. When all of these Muslim terror attacks happen, the very first thing that Democrats say is you can't judge Muslims or the faith of Islam based on this tiny segment of the population that tries to kill people. Yet when there is a protest in Charlottesville that represents a tiny scintilla of right-wing racists, everybody comes out and says, how in the world can Donald Trump not immediately condemn this? How can Republicans handle having racist and Nazis in their party? How in the world, think about this, how in the world can you not say those two things are not similar? In both situations, you have radicals who don't represent the larger context. Most Republicans are not racist Nazis, right? Just like most Muslims are not terrorists. Yet why is the response so incredibly different to these situations? Think about it. Tell me why. Tell me that's not 100% accurate. I didn't hear a lot of people saying, oh, Barack Obama has got to condemn Black Lives Matter when they killed people because they had crazy people doing it in Baton Rouge and Dallas. Crazy people are gonna crazy. This is one of the great lessons I learned in life at a young age. If you try to change your life based on crazy people, then you will never do anything. People said this to me when I took my family to London and Paris this summer. They said, how in the world could you take your family, your 9, your 6, your 2-year-old, your wife, to London and Paris this summer when they just had terror attacks in London, when Paris just had terror attacks? You know what I said? You can't allow terrorists to change your life. You can't do it. Because if you do, you'll never leave your house. That's what they want. They want to change your life. And it would suck. I'm not going to lie. I'd like to live forever. But I'd rather not live forever and not die every day by being a pussy than change my life and my choices. All right? That's the truth. And so I want you guys to think about that as the media covers this situation. Donald Trump is correct when he says, if you're going to take down Robert E. Lee statues, then the next step is going to be we got to take down Thomas Jefferson and change the name of Washington, D.C. He's right. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I'm a middle-of-the-road guy. What's the first thing Al Sharpton came out and said? We got to stop funding the Jefferson Memorial because Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. If Thomas Jefferson and George Washington had lived in Virginia in 1861 and had been of age to fight in the Civil War, they would have fought probably for the state of Virginia. That's the truth. Because 99% of all Civil War soldiers didn't choose how to fight based on what they thought of slavery. They chose whether to fight or not based on what state they were in. Your state used to be your country, and this drives me insane. What side you were on was a geographic variable. If you were in the South, you fought for the South 99% of the time. If you were in the North, you fought for the North 99% of the time. 99% of all soldiers were racist as hell. Go look at all the riots that happened in the North when Abraham Lincoln allowed black soldiers into the Union Army. The North rioted. Look at what happened at the end of the Civil War. People don't know this, but Robert E. Lee pushed through the Confederate Congress an offer of freedom to any black slave who would fight for the South. When Petersburg fell in 1865, go do your own research, but this is 100% true, there were black Confederate soldiers marching and training to fight for the South. That's the truth. That is 100% the truth. So everybody out there who has this idea that the war was fought to end slavery, that's not true. I named my second son after Abraham Lincoln. I know the stories. Brilliant strategic move by Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation in January 1st of 1863 after the Battle of Antietam, aka Sharpsburg. But the reason why he did it, and it was a brilliant political ploy, was because it kept England and France from joining the South and helping them to gain their independence. Just like when France joined the United States during the Revolutionary War, that's what actually put the United States over the top and got the United States independence from Great Britain. So they were afraid that if they got foreign intervention, that they would lose the war by making that smart strategic play. And by the way, nobody talks about this either, but do you know what the Emancipation Proclamation didn't do? It didn't free the slaves in the northern slaveholding states. It didn't free the slaves in Kentucky, Missouri, or Maryland. Didn't free the slaves there. Those were border states. Go read the Emancipation Proclamation. It only freed slaves in the region that was rebelling against that was trying to secede. It was a brilliant strategic play. But don't turn the Civil War into this Disneyfication of the universe where there was a good side and it was the North, and there was a bad side and it was the South. Use your brains, actually read historically, and get familiar with what happened in this country, as opposed to trying to only buy in to social media, which does not do nuance. Social media does not do nuance well. You're either the greatest or the worst. You're either good, you're either evil. You're either God or you're Satan. There's no in between. That's the truth. And social media, in addition to not doing nuance, doesn't even reflect the population of the country because, again, as I just told you, 62% of American people, including half of Democrats and 61% of independents, do not believe that Confederate monuments should actually come down. Yet, if you watch the way this situation is being covered in the mainstream media, you would think that it's like 90% in favor of bringing them down, 10% in favor of leaving them up. I'm telling you right now, this is a major story where Donald Trump is actually on the right side and the population is behind him, and the media doesn't want to acknowledge it. Further, we are in an era right now where the far right and the far left are both fighting against each other and making each other stronger. They are pulling people from the middle. What I'm imploring all of you to do who watch this show and listen to the show and read Outkick is not give in to the extremes on either side. Use your brains. Acknowledge that the truth is often sometimes in the middle. Acknowledge that the truth, sometimes the right can be right, sometimes the left can be right. Correct? Use logic, use facts, actually read a history book. Don't buy in to the easy sell of good versus evil, of the Disneyfication of American politics, where everything is basically the equivalent of animals in Disney movies. There's either a good animal or there's a bad animal, and there's no in between. Don't be a sheep. And so it drives me insane. If you want to read about Civil War history, Google right now Clay Travis Confederate flag. You can read the column that I wrote 2 years ago. It'll tell you more about this process than anybody ever would be able to tell you in the media. I didn't expect that this was going to be my wheelhouse. When I was reading every Civil War history book known to man as a kid growing up in Nashville, I didn't think that at the age of 38, I'd be sitting around an expert on the cultural flashpoints of Confederate monuments and of the Civil War in general, but I am. I'm in the 99.99 percentile on knowledge of the Civil War and politics surrounding the Civil War and everything else there. And I would encourage you to share this if you got people out there who are getting seduced by the idea of good versus evil. As in most things, it's more complicated than just a simple somebody was great and somebody else was awful. That's the truth, okay? All right, I will now allow you guys to do some rapid fire responding. What questions do you guys have? I'm not sure if I'm still welcome at Disney World. Probably not welcome at Disney World because everybody's abandoning ESPN. How big are my biceps? Not as big as my triceps. I got great triceps. I'm going to be honest with you. For a 38-year-old dad of three who has a website and a daily Periscope and Facebook show, I've got some of the best triceps out there. So many questions. Mount Rushmore should stay up. I mean, questions like that are totally absurd, right? I mean, the Lincoln Memorial should stay up. Here's the problem. You cannot judge historical figures based on our present day reality. Martin Luther King, one of my heroes, did not believe that gay people should get married. If you went back in time and got Martin Luther King on the record about gay men getting married, they'd have to take down every statue about Martin Luther King too, because he would have come out hardcore against gay dudes. Because in the 1960s, it was a different world than it is today, right? And he was a preacher who read the Bible. What's fascinating about this in general is that Martin Luther King's not perfect. Go read the Taylor Branch trilogy. Martin Luther King, I tell you this, nobody talks about it. The night before the I Have a Dream speech, Martin Luther King was in the Mayweather Hotel in Washington, D.C. They have him on audio tape banging prostitutes saying, and I swear, I'm fucking for Jesus. Martin Luther King, the night before he gave the I Have a Dream speech, was in a Washington, D.C. hotel, balls deep in prostitutes, screaming, I am fucking for Jesus. All right? They have him on audio tape. The FBI was surveilling him at the time. They have him on audio tape doing that. All right? This is 100% true. Go read, again, all of the Taylor Branch books. It's an unbelievable story. 100% true. Martin Luther King, balls deep in prostitutes, screaming, I'm fucking for Jesus. When Martin Luther King got shot on the balcony at the Lorraine Motel, there was a mistress he had just banged in his hotel room right then and there. When he walked out of the hotel room putting on his tie, there was a mistress he had just banged in his hotel room when he got shot. All right? Martin Luther King, poonhound extraordinaire, just like JFK, just like Bill Clinton, just like Hugh Freeze, just like a lot of dudes who've been famous over the years, okay? That doesn't mean he wasn't an incredible political leader. This is why I've always said I don't care who you're banging, right? I don't care who you're banging if you can do your job. I've said this for a long time. If Donald Trump could be as good of a president as Bill Clinton was, then I'd be totally fine with him getting blowjobs from interns every day, right? I don't care. That's his personal choice. He can deal with that with Melania and his other wives, right? I just want you to be good at your job. I've been making this argument for a long time. If I need open heart surgery, I don't care how many people my doctor's having sex with that he's not married to. I don't care at all. I want the best damn open heart surgeon that's available anywhere in the country. Okay? That's the truth. That's the truth. So, just like I want the best open heart surgeon if my life is on the line, I want the best president too. And I don't care if it's JFK and he's banging Marilyn Monroe and everybody else. I don't care if it's Bill Clinton and he's banging interns. I don't care if it's Hillary Clinton and she's got a harem full of the Thunder Down Under boys, right? If that makes her better at president, go get them, right? And so this idea of historical relevance in the 21st century based on what guys used to do or women used to do back in the days past. You know, FDR died at Powder Springs, Georgia, I think, or Warm Springs, Georgia, wherever it was, with his mistress beside him. And the motherfucker had polio. He couldn't even walk, and he had a mistress. We don't even know if his dick worked that he had a mistress. All right? But he got us through World War II. Go back and look historically. Lyndon Johnson passed the important civil rights bills. Lyndon Johnson bragged that he had more accidental affairs than Bobby Kennedy, and JFK did on purpose. That's the truth. So, like, Lyndon Johnson nicknamed his dick Jimbo and flashed it at everybody all the time. Pretty decent president, great Senate Majority Leader. Wasn't perfect when it came to dick flashing, but he was a really good politician. I say all of this because we've ended up in this artificial universe of absurdity where you have to be perfect, right? And as a result, we end up with people who are not as flawed as they used to be, but also don't necessarily have the same talents that people have had in the past. All of these things are true. All of these facts are true. You can look them up historically, read a book. People are imperfect. What is fascinating to me, okay? What is fascinating to me is that in pop culture, we embrace imperfection in our characters. Who do we love? Tony Soprano, Walter White, anybody on The Wire, Game of Thrones, where people are having incest and sex left and right. We love imperfection in fictional characters. We crave perfection in real life. Shouldn't it be the opposite? Shouldn't we be saying, hey, you know what we need? We need perfection in fictional life because it gives us an idea of what we could be, and not perfection in real life. Instead, it's the opposite. I love to ask that question. Why do we love characters, Mad Men? Look at everything Don Draper did. People loved him. Why do we love characters with severe issues in fictional television right now, and also our literature and also our movies? Yet in real life, we demand purity and certitude. It's because I think so many people are fake when it comes to trying to have their own particular code of morality. I'm laid back in that stuff. I presume that everybody's flawed. I presume that everybody sins. I presume that everybody on every single day is trying to be better than they actually are. I'm never as good as I would like to be. I'm never as good of a dad as I would like to be. Never as good of a husband. I'm flawed, right? But I try to be better than I am every single day, right? That's the truth. And as a result, hopefully, I'm a little bit better every month than I was the month before. That's my rant from you guys. I want you to think, read history. Don't buy into the idea that the Confederates were awful and that the North were great, that it was a war over slavery and everybody on the northern side loved slaves and everybody on the southern side hated them. 3% of Southern soldiers had slaves, okay? The vast majority did not. The vast majority of people who fought in the Civil War fought for wherever their home state was. They went and fought for wherever their home state was because they got conscripted. If you lived in Pennsylvania, you fought for the North. If you lived in Alabama, you fought for the South. And it wasn't because you made some grand design. It was because that was your home, okay? And so, as a result, the South, if they had won, I said this and people get upset. I said, look, if the South had won the Civil War, eventually, probably really soon, because in 1865 they were already offering freedom to all slaves that were willing to fight for the South. That's a fact. Again, look it up. There were Confederate slave soldiers fighting and training in Petersburg when they got run over in April 1865. When you look at the way that slavery ended, the South would have ended slavery too. Now, is the South good when it comes to race relations? No. It's a black eye on the South for a long time. There's no doubt. I love it here. I live here. But there's no doubt that the South has been wrong on race for a very, very long time. But this idea that in 1865 the North was a lot better on race, go look at all the race riots that happened in the North. The country was racist. The South would have eventually ended slavery too, maybe within 5 years of becoming independent. I'll talk to any economist. And so the result is the United States gets the benefit of its evolution towards becoming a better country. For the fact that women can vote, for the fact that minorities can vote, for the fact that everybody becomes free and flourishing. Whereas the South is held in amber, and whatever views it had from 1861 to 1865 are not evolving. Now, I will say this. People who are historical in nature do have some blame for allowing the Confederate flag to be taken over by neo-Nazis and racists. Because the people who fought for the South as generals were very moderate. Robert E. Lee would find neo-Nazis today to be totally abhorrent. He would. He didn't own slaves. He idolized George Washington. He was offered the command of the Union Army the night before. He decided not to take it from Abraham Lincoln because his loyalty was to the state of Virginia, which was like a country. Great analogy. Before the Civil War, you said the United States are, because every state was individual. After the Civil War, you said the United States is, because the Civil War made the United States one country. Prior to the Civil War, the United States was a collection of countries in individual states. If the South had won, we would have ended up a lot like the republics in Latvia, Lithuania. Georgia would have been its own country. Texas would have been its own country. Virginia would have been its own country. And we would have this balkanized universe of states. It would be like the EU, a lot like Europe, where all these individual states have different policies in place, and we wouldn't have been the colossus that we've become, and we certainly wouldn't have been able to beat Nazi Germany in World War II. So we got the right result in the Civil War. But I would just encourage you guys, I implore you, study history. Don't assume that history is easy. Read everything, okay? Do it. I encourage you. If you want to read some great books, they're long, but they're great books. 2 best books I've read about history in the South. One, Shelby Foote's Civil War Narrative. It's huge. It's thousands of pages, but it'll take you through everything that happened in the Civil War. You'll understand every character. You'll come to like both Northern and Southern generals, and you'll have a better comprehension for that war than anybody who's having an opinion right now on social media by and large. Second, read Taylor Branch's Civil Rights Trilogy, Parting the Waters, about America in the Martin Luther King Jr. years. Why is Martin Luther King one of my heroes? Read those books. He's a much more interesting character than kind of the black Jesus that he's been sainted to become in modern day life. He is a flawed human being, just like all of us, but he's also a fearless leader. And he is an amazing story. Read the Taylor Branch story. Is he banging prostitutes before the I Have a Dream speech? Yes. But that doesn't mean that speech wasn't really good. And it doesn't mean he didn't put his life on the line again and again and again. Just absolutely fantastic. Shelby Foote and Taylor Branch, both trilogies. If you're interested in Southern history, read both those books. One about the Civil Rights Movement, one about the Civil War. And you will emerge infinitely more learned and knowledgeable than the vast majority of people out there on social media running around believing that there's good and evil in every single character and that somebody's either good or they're the evil. That's my best suggestion. Use your brains, accept that nuance is real, that people are imperfect, that everyone sins, and that no one is infallible. And don't buy into the characterizations that exist in social media. I love all of you. My name is Clay Travis. This has been Outkick the Show. All the facts that I gave you can be looked up. You can go check them out. It's a historical record that most of the people don't actually have. If you enjoy this show, go share it with your friends. Outkick Premium is launching next week. Use your brains. Don't be sheep. Remember, lions don't lose sleep over the opinions of sheep. Be a lion, not a sheep. I'm Clay Travis, DBAP. This is Outkick the Coverage on Fox Sports Radio.